Breaking news spread quickly when Pastor Creflo Dollar, one of the most well-known and most debated pastors in America, was suddenly rushed to the emergency room after a frightening health crisis. His family was in shock, his followers were worried, and the church community everywhere began asking questions. You won't believe how quickly everything changed because just days earlier, Pastor Dollar was seen preaching and moving with the same energy people had known for years. But in one unexpected moment, destiny took an unexpected turn, and now everyone was left wondering what really happened behind closed doors. Let me tell you, this was not just about a pastor falling sick. Pastor Dollar was not an ordinary figure. For decades, he stood at the front of World Changers Church International, leading thousands in Atlanta and millions more across the world through television. His sermons were powerful, his image was larger than life, and his voice had carried him into homes across the globe. Yet, along with his influence came controversy. His lifestyle, his teachings on prosperity, and even his personal choices had been under the public eye for years. And this is where it gets interesting, because when news broke about his health crisis, people were not only praying for him, they were also asking whether this was connected to the heavy weight he had been carrying for years. Reports confirmed that on the day of the incident, Pastor Dollar had been at a private family gathering. He was surrounded by close loved ones when he began feeling sudden chest discomfort and dizziness. The situation quickly grew tense. Family members rushed to his side, and within minutes, emergency services were called. Witnesses described the scene as chaotic, filled with panic and desperate prayers. By the time paramedics arrived, everyone present knew that this was far more serious than just fatigue or stress. He was quickly taken to the hospital as doctors prepared for the worst. But here's the shocking part. Insiders whispered that signs had already been showing in the weeks before, and maybe no one wanted to admit how serious things had become. People close to the church remembered how in recent sermons, his energy seemed a little weaker. At times, his voice did not carry the same fire, and some even noticed he looked tired, sometimes out of breath. Still, like many leaders who feel the pressure to stand strong no matter what, he kept moving forward. And then the sudden collapse came. The craziest part is that when the news reached social media, it exploded in a matter of hours. Hashtags like #PrayForCreflo started trending, with thousands posting prayers and emotional messages. Supporters lifted him up in faith, while critics began raising old debates about health, ministry, stress, and the reality behind prosperity preaching. What makes the story different is that, for the first time, the man who had always represented strength and prosperity was now seen as vulnerable, fragile, and in need of prayers himself. It forced people to ask questions they had avoided for years. Was this only a random health scare, or was it the result of years of nonstop ministry, pressure, and controversy? And most of all, would this moment change the future of his church forever? When the news of Pastor Creflo Dollar's sudden hospitalization spread, his family's world turned upside down. His wife, Pastor Taffy Dollar, was by his side when it happened, holding his hand as paramedics carried him into the ambulance. The family rushed to the hospital, some flying in from different places, canceling all commitments without hesitation. In the waiting room, the atmosphere was heavy. You won't believe the silence that filled the room between bursts of tears and whispered prayers. People who had always seen Pastor Dollar as unshakable now saw him lying in a hospital bed, and that image broke their hearts. Let me tell you, for the Dollar family, this was not just about health. It was about faith being tested in the most painful way. They had always stood strong on the message of perseverance, but now they had to live it out in real life. Witnesses described the family as emotional, sometimes holding each other, sometimes bowing their heads in prayer. The craziest part was that even in the middle of all this, questions about his future already began rising in quiet corners of the hospital halls. Would he recover enough to return to the pulpit? Or was this the beginning of a chapter nobody had prepared for? Meanwhile, at World Changers Church International, chaos began to build. Congregation members, used to hearing their leader every week, were suddenly left without direction. Phone lines at the church office rang nonstop, and their social media pages filled with thousands of comments. Members were desperate for updates, but leadership did not release many details. This is where it gets interesting. Inside the church walls, leaders had gathered for emergency meetings, not just to pray, but to decide how much information should be shared with the public. Some elders believed in complete honesty, saying the congregation deserved to know the truth about their pastor's condition. Others disagreed, warning that too much information could damage the church's reputation and even slow down donations. But here's the shocking part. The ministry, despite its massive influence, seemed completely unprepared for such a sudden crisis. Debates over transparency grew tense, and decisions had to be made quickly to keep the ministry stable. At the same time, financial questions were being raised. Pastor Dollar had always been at the center of fundraising efforts and big church projects. With him absent, leaders feared donations could drop. Some programs were paused and substitute pastors were asked to step in, but the truth was clear. No one could fill his shoes. What makes this story different is that, unlike smaller churches, World Changers was not just a place of worship. It was a full empire with schools, TV programs, and branches across the world. One man's health crisis was now shaking an entire system. And the craziest part was how quickly debates started online. Some said megapastors like Creflo Dollar live under pressure no human can handle. Others argued that the prosperity gospel lifestyle he preached came with its own set of burdens. But destiny took an unexpected turn here, because while the world was discussing, the family and inner circle were facing the very real question: was this the end of Creflo Dollar's leadership as they knew it, or just another trial he would overcome? For years, Pastor Creflo Dollar had appeared unstoppable. His energy on stage was unmatched, his sermons stretched for hours, and his presence commanded entire arenas. But you won't believe what insiders began to reveal after his sudden health scare. This moment may not have been as unexpected as it seemed. Let me tell you, whispers of his declining health had been circling for years, only no one wanted to speak about it openly. Behind the bright lights and booming sermons, there were signs of struggle that were quietly brushed aside. Some members recalled moments when his voice cracked more often, his messages became shorter, and he leaned more on associate pastors to carry the pulpit. At the time, people thought he was just tired from traveling or handling church matters, but here is the shocking part. Some now believe these were early warnings of something far more serious. The craziest part? Insiders revealed that just weeks before his collapse, Pastor Dollar had canceled a major speaking engagement at the last minute. Officially, it was said to be a scheduling conflict, but those close to him admitted it was really due to fatigue and health struggles that were quietly worsening. This is where it gets interesting. Being a megachurch pastor was not just about preaching. It was about running a massive organization, managing millions of dollars in budgets, handling staff, traveling constantly, and carrying the spiritual weight of thousands of people. Medical experts have often said that this kind of nonstop stress can trigger major health problems, including heart disease, diabetes, and even strokes. Add age to the mix, Pastor Dollar was in his early 60s, and the pressure became almost impossible to ignore. Destiny took an unexpected turn when the man known for preaching strength and prosperity was suddenly fighting his own battle for survival. What makes this story different is the culture around prosperity gospel itself. Leaders like Creflo Dollar often felt they had to maintain an image of strength and blessing at all times. Admitting weakness could look like a failure of faith. So many chose silence even when their bodies were breaking down. This silence, however, only made things worse. Supporters now say that by ignoring symptoms, he might have pushed himself into an even deeper health crisis. And let me tell you, the impact of these hidden struggles rippled far beyond his own life. Members of his church, who had noticed small changes but never questioned them, now wondered how long their leader had been suffering. Critics argued that the prosperity gospel lifestyle demanded an impossible standard, one where even health struggles had to be hidden to protect the image of success. But here is the shocking part. While the world prayed for his recovery, some inside the church began asking if this crisis had been building for years, waiting for the moment when it could no longer be ignored. For more than 3 decades, Pastor Creflo Dollar had been the face and voice of World Changers Church International. But after his sudden health crisis, the question everyone whispered was simple. What happens if he cannot return to the pulpit the same way again? You won't believe how quickly the topic of succession began to surface, even while he was still fighting to recover. Let me tell you, inside the ministry walls, quiet conversations started about who could possibly carry his vision forward if he stepped back. Some pointed to his wife, Pastor Taffy Dollar. She had been by his side since the very beginning, preaching, leading, and building the ministry with him. Many saw her as the natural successor, someone who knew the heart of the church better than anyone. But here is the shocking part. Insiders admitted that while she was respected, not everyone was convinced she had the same larger-than-life charisma that made Creflo Dollar a global figure. This is where it gets interesting, because others suggested younger associate pastors, men and women who had trained under Creflo's teachings, might be prepared to rise up and take leadership. Still, the risk of losing momentum loomed large, since the entire ministry had been so closely tied to one man's image. What makes this story different is the scale of World Changers. This was not a small local church that could adjust quickly. It was a massive empire with schools, TV broadcasts, international branches, and millions of dollars flowing through its programs. If members lost confidence, donations could fall, programs could suffer, and the stability of the entire ministry could be shaken. The craziest part? Some insiders claimed there were already signs of quiet power struggles among leaders, with certain figures positioning themselves for influence, just in case a leadership vacuum appeared. At the same time, people outside the church began interpreting his illness in a spiritual way. Some believed it was an attack meant to stop his calling. Others felt it was a divine sign, showing that a shift in leadership was destined to come. Destiny took an unexpected turn because while the family and close friends focused on recovery and prayers, the larger faith community debated whether this was the beginning of a new chapter for World Changers or the closing of a historic era. And let me tell you, this was not just about one man's health. This moment carried the weight of an entire ministry and a theology that had shaped millions of lives. As supporters waited for updates and critics kept raising questions, one truth became clear. The story of Pastor Creflo Dollar's health scare was not only about survival. It was about legacy, power, and the uncertain future of a church that might never be the same again.